In the town of Kinsale, which is a summer resort on that coast, there happen to be more tourists than usual. This is one of the really beautiful parts of Ireland, and without being too tribal, one of the truly beautiful parts of Europe. And surrounding it are many small towns and villages and farms of the flatlands there, and the terrain is flat and does not have, the more you go south, the Gulf Stream warmth, which produces the great palms and tropical branches in Kerry some miles away. And this is what happened there. And this is how it affected almost all of Ireland in 1988. Travelling back by car, on one of the fine evenings, a couple stopped at a grotto which contained a statue of the Virgin Mary. And Ireland, of course, being a Catholic country, had, as many other countries did, what was called a Marian year in 1950. And in other words, it was the year in which Our Lady was celebrated and honoured as the Mother of Christ. And the result of that year were that hundreds of small grottos and statues and shrines had been set up and left there. And this one was off the road. It was high up, and it was very typical as one of the outcomes of that year. And on one of those sunny evenings, when travel in a car or visit to the places which contained such a grotto seemed like a pleasant summer diversion, a woman got out of the car and saw the statue of the Virgin Mary move. Now, within really not weeks, but days, someone reported a similar phenomenon at another shrine, and then another, and then another. And then there were really sub-headlines of the Irish Times and second leaders on the evening news, and whole radio programs, and finally whole television documentaries were devoted to this phenomenon. A woman had seen a statue move in a city church, another had seen the Virgin reach out her hand, a couple saw the Virgin move as if to step down from her shrine, and so on and so on. And then the headlines gave way, certainly at least in the urban media, to analysis. Sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists began to feature on television. And they explained, in many different explanations, that in fact this was not unusual, that in times of stress and of hardship and of recession, all this sort of thing, this had been observed. They were immensely patronizing explanations, but they were there, and they were all over the media. But by this time, the summer evenings were getting shorter. Nevertheless, the clear and now warm and twilight hours were filled with hundreds of cars and visitors and couples and whole families converging on any place on the western seaboard, but especially near Kinsale on the southern seaboard, where this had been observed. And in an outpouring of insistence and longing, men and women with accents which were not so often features of the urban Dublin news programmes described what they had seen, and they could not be shaken from their stories. And then, as it happened, the explanations grew less frequent. The outrage and suspicion of the Catholic priests, who had disowned and warned against these visions from the very beginning, became less emphatic. The journalistic silly season passed, the evenings grew colder, the rain returned, and as quickly as it had come, the phenomenon was over. No statues moved, no sociologists talked, and silence and normality returned. I happen to remember that summer clearly. I remember driving down Dublin roads where the laburnum and the lilac, which are great features of the city, in the early summer filled the edges with yellow and violet, and listening to the car radio. Something seemed to have happened that was not faith and could not be called religion, that was short of hysteria and was by no means rational. From the safety of a cosmopolitan city, which Dublin had finally become, with fast cars and fast food and a very limited concentration span, I could hear, to use Joyce's great phrase, the bat squeak of another Ireland and another century. And through the statistics of debt and unemployment and northern violence and all the anomalies of the time, I could hear the elegy and the anger break out one last time, lamenting a simpler time and a surer one. Of course, I did not believe that the statues had moved, but I did not believe the sociologists either. I knew enough about the unreason of Irish history to respect and even to have some awe at what had taken place on those fierce and unaccountable evenings